All right, thank you everyone for coming out today to City Hall for us to make what I believe is a very, very exciting announcement for the future of this city and for the future of the National Civil War Museum. I am pleased to say that after many months of hard work and negotiation and back and forth and effort, we've come to an agreement which we believe will chart a sustainable path forward, both for the museum and for the city of Harrisburg. This agreement will also settle all outstanding disputes, legal and otherwise, between the museum and the city, and finally bring us to a point where we are all focused on the same goal, which is a brighter future for the city and the museum. So let me tell you what we've agreed to. Here are the major bullet points. The first issue is that we have agreed to give the museum, the city has, an option to purchase the artifacts. And really at the heart of all of this has been the difficulty of having an arrangement whereby the city owned the artifacts, the museum didn't own the artifacts. Not only did that affect the museum's ability to go out and fundraise, it also was a major obligation on the part of the cities. We've agreed to a purchase price for those artifacts of $5.25 million, which we believe reflects a fair bulk price for those artifacts and also a reasonable target for the museum to fundraise towards. From those proceeds, we are looking to take $1 million of the sales price and put it in a capital reserve fund, which will be there to secure the long-term repairs that will be necessary to preserve the building as it ages over time. We already know we have some issues with the roof that need to be addressed, but we just haven't had the funding to be able to do that. This would provide $1 million right away into that fund to start that up. And then the fund would be supplemented over time with rent, which we'll get to in a moment. In addition to the establishment of the $1 million reserve fund, we're looking to take about $4 million of the purchase price and put that into the funding of our Reservoir Park master plan. And if many of you have seen this master plan, it is a brilliant vision for what the future of Reservoir Park might become. From additional outdoor options for picnickers, to a spray park, to new playgrounds, to a dog park, you name it. The price tag for the overall Reservoir Park master plan is more than double that. It's about $8 million. But we believe, as a city, that we're going to be able to raise a good chunk of that through grants. We also intend, as you'll see as we propose our budget moving forward, to begin funding some of that as capital projects from our own budget. But to have the prospect of a $4 million cash infusion from the purchase of these artifacts coming in and would allow us, I think, to complete the plan and be a great, great benefit both to the city and the museum. And if you're asking, why now? Why is this happening now? I think the Reservoir Park master plan has a lot to do with it. The museum was actively involved in that, as was the public, and everyone has a vision for how they'd like to see this park be transformed. So in addition to that, and there's some other financial issues that get resolved as a part of this agreement, the museum has also agreed to begin paying the city rent. And that rent starts at $45,000 a year, gradually goes up to $60,000 over the course of this initial 5-year option period, and then eventually goes up to $100,000 a year. And again, that rent would be something that we would then also be able to supplement our capital reserve fund, replenish that, and constantly have a means of addressing the capital improvements that are needed. In exchange for that, the city is acknowledging that it will pay for the outstanding capital improvements that have been made to the building, really from 2009, when the relationship started to break down, all the way through 2017. That's a total of about $288,153 in outstanding bills that we haven't been able to pay up to this point. The rent will be credited towards that $288,000 over this option period. So no money will exchange hands during this 5-year period, but the rent will be credited towards those outstanding bills, so that as we emerge with hopefully a sales agreement, we will also have resolved the outstanding capital improvements, and we can look entirely towards the future. So it is our hope that this will be successful. We believe that we're going to be able to work together to go out and fundraise now for a collection and for the long-term security and sustainability of the museum. Much easier to do that than fundraising for operational expenses, say, or fundraising for a museum that doesn't own its own collection. And we have a 5-year period to do that together. We can say that other museums and entities involved in the Civil War have been very successful in fundraising. We believe there's going to be a strong likelihood of that happening. If that does happen, then we will anticipate and look towards a bright, longer-term future for the city and the museum, a renovated reservoir park, and a gloriously successful museum as sort of at the center of all of that. If we are unsuccessful, which we certainly hope we won't be, then there is a provision in the agreement that we will, in 5 years' time, start to sell the collection. And it calls for a selling of 20% of the collection in year 5 if we aren't able to consummate the agreement. And at that time, we'd have to, sort of reevaluate and look to where we're going. But the important thing is that we've come together for what we think is the good of the public and the good of the city and the good of the region. And I will say that sometime in the heat of battle, rhetoric can get extreme or can get heated. But at no point have we stopped talking, have we stopped pushing, have we stopped trying to work together. It was always my hope that we could come up with a plan that would be workable from both the museum and the city's part. I think we've achieved that today. And it wouldn't have been possible without the gentleman you see around me here. I want to give special thanks to Neil West, who has been the attorney for the Civil War Museum, and Neil Grover, who is, of course, the solicitor for the city. I also want to thank Bert Snyder, who, as the head of the board at the museum, made it clear to me early on that this is something that he was committed to wanting to see, and I think we had a terrific partner in you, sir, so thank you for that. And I also want to introduce Jean Barr, who has been not only a published author and an outspoken member of the board and a real cheerleader from the museum, but one of many who helped bring the board and the city to consensus on this issue. So thanks to Jean. Jean, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Thanks to all of you for coming out. Again, I'd like to offer my thanks to the mayor, Neil Grover, for their work, and again, congratulate Bert Snyder, our chair, and thank again Neil West, who when I was chair, didn't I call you counsel for life? He's still, he is. He's still after me for that one. But I'd like to thank all of these folks for coming together and coming up with what we believe is an important move forward for this museum and for the city. We've got an incredibly gifted and committed group of people who serve on our board. It is a nationwide board. They've committed their own time, literally money and effort in order to advance the cause of this museum. It is one of, truly, I think Harrisburg needs to understand what it is that we all do have here. It is one of the best museums on this topic in the United States, and I've seen many, many of them. It is one of only 11 Smithsonian-affiliated institutions in this Commonwealth, and it's regularly voted not only here in Harrisburg by, kind of the Best of Museum Award, but also is recognized by national publications in the topic as one of the best Civil War museums in the United States. It's, again, really a crown jewel for this Commonwealth. And we're extremely pleased to be here. Again, as the mayor said, it took us a long time to get here. It's a lot of discussion back and forth. But I think that all of us came to realize that this made a whole heck of a lot of sense for both. We want to continue to move this forward, this issue forward, for the museum, for the people of the Commonwealth, and to be able to keep this museum as an integral part of the mayor's vision for Reservoir Park. Last thing that I'll note is, and then we can sure take some questions, is that our board has approved this. It was approved by our board. We want to move forward with this. As the mayor noted, it's certainly, we understand the challenge we are undertaking, but again, there are some ways in which for us it makes a whole lot of sense to be able to acquire this collection, which is a phenomenal collection, many of them one-of-a-kind items, and to continue the mission we have of educating people about this most difficult time in the nation's history. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor, and we can move forward as we choose. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gene. And I think we can end on, so what comes next? As Gene mentioned, the Civil War Museum Board has voted on this agreement. They have adopted it. We will now be taking the agreement and submitting that to City Council for their review. Most likely, they will have a hearing or a series of hearings to vet the contract. We'll make sure those are publicized on our website, at which point in time they will vote. Should they vote to accept the contract at that time, the initial rent payment would transfer on the books, begin to be credited against the outstanding capital improvement bill. All of the outstanding legal disputes would be resolved at that moment, and we would have a clear path forward. Again, one that could lead to sustainability for the museum and the city, and one that we think can be successful. So that's what will happen next. We wanted to do this press conference today because it is now in City Council's court for their consideration. Questions? Yes?
This settles a lot of the financial issues that have been ongoing, but you also mentioned and other issues.
Mm-hmm.
So how have the discussions been going between both sides? Has everything been pretty, good? I don't know. Spirits?
I believe that at the heart of this, it's always been about the financial issues. I recognize that the museum has an extraordinarily amazing world-class collection of documents and artifacts. In fact, during this whole period, I can tell you I've received correspondence from scholars throughout the country, people who have urged us as the city and the museum to reach some sort of an agreement, because it would be a shame, a true shame, to see a collection like that broken up, sold off, go back into the closets and the private libraries of collectors and not be an asset for the public. So we believe what the museum has should be made available to the public. This is a path towards it. At root, it's always been about the finances. I think we inherited an arrangement that didn't work financially for a variety of reasons, and this is an agreement which is much different and which I think will work in everyone's interest. Yes, sir, Jason.
Is any of the purchase price already in hand? Does the board already have money, that $5 million to start putting towards the purchase? Or is it all
I know the board has been fundraising on its own for its endowment and for its operations, and that's continuing and ongoing. But this would be a separate fundraising campaign, specifically allowing the museum to purchase its own collection and basically preserving the collection long term. That's a pitch, and I hope people in the country are out there watching and seeing this. This is an opportunity to make sure that that collection stays together, available for public access in a world-class museum for the long haul. So people hopefully will step up, seize this opportunity, and it's an extraordinary opportunity, and one not to be missed. Yeah, hang on one sec. We'll go to Portia.
Not only
Yep.
raising money to pay for the collection, but just the annual rent payment, that $45,000-$6,500. Do you guys have that money to pay? Because before, you guys haven't been paying anything really for years. So where does that money
Yeah, let me just say, and they can address this as well. But during the 5-year option period for this fundraising, the amount that is to be paid in rent is roughly equivalent to the amount that that the city currently has not been able to pay in capital improvements. So during the 5-year period, rent is not going to exchange hands. The issue is going to be resolved. So as we move forward with the sale of the collection, the establishment of the Capital Reserve Fund, and I think through that process, the museum really gets to go even further in telling its story on a national level. They will, and continuing to fundraise as well for its endowment and other issues, will be in a position moving forward where that rent is going to be a very reasonable amount to be paid. And so again, it starts at $45,000, goes up to $60,000, slowly but surely, and then it caps at about $100,000. The purpose of the rent is so that there is income to come in to cover the responsibilities of the building. That's it. It's not to make it difficult for the museum. It is since right now both the collection and the building are owned by the city. We're resolving the ownership of the collection, but the building would continue to be owned by the city. So there's got to be a dedicated revenue stream that can be used to make repairs on that building long term. And that's fiscally responsible, and that's why we have the rent. Yes?
Yes. How did the city determine, or the city and the museum determine the value of the collection? Did you hire a third-party appraiser?
We did have it looked at. There was a lot of back and forth with the museum on this, and we reached. It wasn't practical to do a real detailed and expensive appraisal of everything. So we came to a number that we felt was fair. It is true that the purchase price is significantly less than the original purchase price for the collection, which was over $10 million. But what you have to remember is a couple of things. One, a lot of these artifacts were purchased in a retail environment. We tried to come up with a price that would be more reflective of maybe an auction value or a realistic value if it were to be sold. There have also been a lot of changes in the marketplace. We don't need to get bogged into that, but from where we are now, where we were a decade ago in terms of value, it's very hard to determine what would be a realistic value. So, but we're comfortable with this number. It also does what we need it to do in terms of establishing the Capital Reserve Fund and funding the Reservoir Park Master Plan. So, and we'll discuss this more with council as the process moves forward. Yeah. Yep. Let me let Gene.
Yeah, let me just add on to that for a minute. I mean, Bert noted that there's about 25,000 artifacts here, so that's quite a bit to undertake in terms of an appraisal. And the mayor's absolutely right. This is not what they paid for, but let me give you maybe more information than you'd like to have. When most of these artifacts were purchased, it was in the mid to late 90s, which I would argue, because I collected a couple, not of these, collected other items myself, it was in a kind of almost a superheated time. It was interest in acquiring those artifacts generally in this country was at a very high period. If you remember, it was in the years following the PBS series, the movie Gettysburg, things were very high. And to be honest, particularly after the Depression, the prices of those items have dropped. If you talk to people in the antiques business, they will tell you they're getting nowhere near various pieces what they did years ago. So unfortunately, in many cases, younger people, to be blunt, don't have the same interest in acquiring antique furniture or some of these artifacts, and the prices have declined. So we believe, after a lot of discussion, that this is a fair price. We're appreciative of the city coming to terms with us on that, and we think this is going to work for both sides.
And to answer your question a little more specifically, no, they didn't come up with the price. It was a mutually negotiated and agreed upon price that we thought was fair. It's also, sure, we could have asked more money, but we have to be realistic in what we think we can raise. And as you look at fundraising efforts, I think the Civil War Trust was referenced and other entities, we feel this is actually a realistic targeted number to do in the next 5 years, and that was important. We didn't want to come here with an agreement that was unrealistic, that couldn't be done, and so the number is I think very realistic. Thanks.
Can Mr.
Okay.
Barr
Yep.
address the attendance issues at the museum? One of the sustainable things going forward with how to get more people to go there to earn more money for the museum. Do you have ideas or plans in place to help that aspect?
Sure.
Yeah, and I want him to do that. I also want to say that key to the museum's attendance is also the implementation of the Reservoir Park Master Plan. The goal for the master plan is to redesign the park in such a way that it is utilized more not only by the residents of the city, but by everyone in the region. And the park is safer, and the park is more easily accessible and has more amenities. So the long-term growth of attendance really is tied to the park. It's always been tied to the park, and part of our problem has been how do we better integrate the park system with the museum, and that's why the Reservoir Park master planning process has really been very helpful, because it brought everyone together to work on a combined vision. But
Yes.
Gene.
Yeah, I completely agree. The park and museum are inextricably linked, and this agreement will move that even further forward. The admissions, I don't have the exact numbers. The admissions are up. A number of years ago, we hired a CEO who's extremely energetic and enthusiastic, Wayne Motz, who travels the country telling the story of the National Civil War Museum. We've had, to be honest, over a period of time, some of the schools have seen cutbacks, and they've had to cut back on some of their bus trips with some of the problems in funding. So that has hit us to a certain degree, but I will tell you that you will, when you go up there, you will see many cars in that parking lot on many number of days. I'm continually just very pleasantly surprised when I go up and see that. The other thing that we think this will do, once we know we've put all this behind us and we're willing to move forward on a united front here, is to dispel any notion of what's going to happen with the museum. The museum's staying. There's no question about that. And we're going to continue to rent it out. There are a lot of functions that are up there, corporate meetings, weddings, et cetera. Again, we're going to continue to move forward with that, along with the normal day-to-day visitation. We've had, I forget how many states we're up to. It's, I don't know, 4 dozen states. All 50 states have been there, 12, 15, 20, over 20 countries. So it is a destination that does bring people to Harrisburg. But again, we recognize this museum is a National Civil War Museum, but it is linked to Reservoir Park and this city. And that's part of what's driving this agreement here.
So you're pretty confident that you'll be able to raise that $5 million?
Our board's certainly committed to it. Look, there's no question it's a challenge, but we know we're going to have to move forward with this. And again, given that we're acquiring the assets in terms of the artifacts, we believe will give people further impetus. I'll be honest, we've talked to people in the past who said, do you own the artifacts? The answer is no. Well, I'm sorry, we really can't help you. From our perspective, this is going to help us move forward so that we own those artifacts. It will help us when we go out to approach foundations. And again, specifically, would you like to preserve and acquire this piece of American history? We think we can tell that story much better and attract more people who are willing to make that investment in this unique facility.
Do you know how many people roughly come to the museum over the course of a year?
Over 43,000 people. Mm-hmm. And does that include the?
That's all.
That's all.
That's the schools.
That's the schools, et
program.
cetera. Yes.
And the benchmarking we do.
Go ahead, please.
The benchmarking we do on other comparable museums, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of marketing that goes into increasing that. We've been increasing the attendance over the last 5 years, and the rate of increase, the benchmarking, we are above comparable museums.
Yep, I'd say from an attendance standpoint, resolving the cloud and some of the negativity and the mystery of what's going to happen, that's going to be good for attendance. The national campaign to save this collection and to keep it together should help bring, I think, a national audience and attention to the museum, which is very positive. You don't have opportunities like this to save and keep for public display a museum like a collection like this anywhere else. We believe people will step up, and as they do, they will learn more about the museum and more about what they can find there. Yeah.
So when will the museum make its first payment to the city?
The first rent payment would be credited the day after council ratifies the agreement, and then subsequently it'll be July of each year for the next 5 years. Yes?
Does this agreement have any impact on those health tax dollars that come to the museum from the Visitors Bureau?
No, it doesn't. And, ultimately, the city is very pleased with the separate agreement it reached with the Harrisburg Regional Visitors Bureau, which is the conduit by which the county distributes a portion of the hotel tax, which is supposed to be used to generate tourism for the city. We reached an agreement with them, I guess now a couple years back, in which they recognized and they indeed decided that they would fund multiple positions at the city to help us build capacity. And what that agreement has done is allowed us to grow Capona and grow the 4th of July, have a full-time advance manager. They've also put hundreds of thousands of dollars into marketing the city's events. That has been very successful, so we are pleased with that. That is not an issue which brings us any concern. And I'll just say personally, I am much more comfortable with, and I think the county will be too, with using tax dollars to fund a museum when the museum is integrated into the long-term economic development vision for the city. So that's what I think this agreement does. It settles that, but it doesn't specifically address the tax issue. Yeah. Larry.
Mayor, I get the impression from what you're saying that this $5 million figure is something that you all just kind of agreed was fair. You know you're going to get questions from the city council regarding that. How are you going to be able to sort of sell that $5 million figure if you didn't actually do a real detailed appraisal of the collection?
Well, we did. We understand. We understand what was purchased, how much it cost. We have the historical comparison for what it's worth of the Wild West artifacts, and for the percentage of dollars that those brought at auction compared to what they cost, which was around a similar percentage. And it was done very thoughtfully. But I think it's a perfectly reasonable conversation for us to have with City Council. But what the public does need to understand is the price that was paid for these artifacts is not necessarily reflective of the monetary value. And that is not to in any way dismiss the historical value of the artifacts, which really is priceless and incredibly important. Yes?
I don't know how it's connected, and maybe you can help clarify. The items that were seized from Mayor Reed's house, how are those included in this purchase? How are they involved at all?
No, this is unrelated to that and really has no bearing. The city, the collection of the Civil War Museum is well documented. It's present at the museum. It's inventoried. It's itemized. It cost more than $5.25 million to acquire, but it's there and it's available for inspection and display.